Hello there guys, and welcome to today's video. Man, I've got a treat for you guys today. So, over the last few months, I've been running D&D games left, right and centre. And it's been really weird. One of these D&D games has been set in a city, and the other has been set in a dungeon, and I've been having a whale of a time. But obviously, dungeons and cities are complete opposites, and I've had a hell of a time trying to get all my notes and my preparation together. I feel like I've been trying to prepare for the opposite ends of the spectrum. And as a result, I've had to come up with really unique ways and really quick and easy ways to manage my prep time. I thought I'd share them with you now. I've never had one before, but this right here is my holy grail. This is my Bible. It is my DM folder. These are things that I will use during a game and also when I'm prepping for an adventure. This is everything that I will need to run a game, apart from my DM screen and my notes. But everything else, all the little things that will help me run a game and help me improvise, are in this folder. I finally printed off the last few things I needed for this, and I thought today I will show you exactly what we are looking at. So, a few things first. One book that I highly recommend picking up before you even consider filling this in is right here. You can find free PDFs of this, but this is a Pathfinder book, and the reason I recommend picking this up for D&D 5th edition is because of these. It has a bunch of random roll tables that can be applied to any system and any setting that you want. So the Pathfinder Game Master guide is just absolutely brilliant for it. Without further ado, let's jump into this and see what goodies I have inside. So the first things first is a few things here that I haven't put in. These are these are some rules that I've added to the game. I'm not going to go into much detail on these because this is a personal DM choice that I've made to change some of the rules in the game, but either way, stuff like that, improved rules or maybe home rules, maybe homebrew stuff, is really great to put into your binder so that you have a copy of it and that you remember it. First thing I have on here is a list of names that you can find easily online on Reddit or make up yourselves. I've got these in sort of like human last names, dragonborn male names, female names. And it's a really simple list to just walk into, cross off once you've used it. Super, super useful. On the back of that, I then have the calendar of Haptos, because this is just so useful for getting an idea of time and time passing within games. We then have my custom rules. And on this page, I have rules all dedicated to running NPCs. So if I need to come up with an NPC on the fly, I can easily find a name for them, and then I can get information on them. I can either turn them into a sidekick using the Unearthed Arcana sidekick rules, which you can find on Wizards of the Coast's website. But I also have then, from the Pathfinder Game Mastery Guide, the NPC goals and backgrounds tables. So this is really useful because it gives you sort of motivations for your NPC characters so they don't feel too flat. And then, of course, I have the D&D Pantheon. The reason I have that is because memorizing one or two deities' names is really good, but when you find that every single priest in your game worships Pelor, then you're a little bit... You're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. So having a few there that I can just flick to and be like, yeah, the god of horizons is pretty useful and adds a bit of variety for me. So I find that useful. So the second page right here is all about shops and urban encounters and urban situations. Now I've shown this before, but I'll give it a quick flick through again. We have a list of the basic adventuring gear, and behind this is a list of every single one of these items and what they do. I also have then how to run an inn and a tavern, all on this section here. So I have a list of in patrons, which is a D100 list. You can find this just by typing into Google D100 D&D lists. I think it's like the first response that comes up, but they have like, there's this brilliant website, they have loads of D100 lists, and those are absolutely fantastic and a really great resource. I then have sort of the Tavern Toolbox, and this I've combined with some other documents that I've made myself, which are all to do with how to run a tavern. I got to be honest, I wish I had this list before, because the ones that I made myself are all to do with the different types of food and sort of resources that you can find within a tavern. If I pull out one of these documents, you can see. So you can see I have just a list of foods, the cost of them, and maybe some custom rules to talk about how I will sort of run those meals. Like, do they give temporary HP, or do they allow for initiative bonuses or something like that? So Tavern Toolbox, really useful right there. On the back of that, I also have some more information on taverns, and this I absolutely love. This side of it, it's the amenities table. I love this because this talks about sort of like, for example, if your players wanted companionship, or if they wanted sort of a room that was private and had a good lock, how much it would cost. So this is really detailed. Really like that tab. This is the pièce de résistance. I'll actually open this up. This is a document that I made, which is all about improving weapons. So I've shown this before, but I've added to it a little bit since the video. This is just the basic weapon table and armor. I also talk about maybe improving if your players want to sharpen a weapon, resize a piece of armor, or add a rune, they can do so. Using DM's Guild resources, the expanded armory and gear, we've got some information there. And the expanded armory and gear 2, I've got in there as well. Then got another resource, which I believe I just googled this and found a PDF of it, which is again expanded armory, and it talks about actually adding equipment to your armory, for example bolstering or lightening equipment to basically help players feel like they have more control on their armor. What I've also done then is I've found a bunch of materials that armor and weapons can be made of. So it's hard to see these, but for example, you can find these just by Googling them. These aren't any specific documents. That all of these are found by Googling either D&D metals or D&D materials. So I believe this is a list of the non-standard materials. For example, like cold iron, or bone, or stone and bronze. So these are really interesting, and they have different properties which I really like. And then it's just a list of the materials that are in D&D. And some of them I've added to and tweaked. This allows me to really, or this allows my players to really customize weapons and items that they might have access to in games. So just slot that back in there. We then have, I've talked about this is on the DM's Guild, the Strongholds, Traders and Merchants. This is a fantastic document for running city encounters. It gives you a list of merchants, the quality of the merchants, so if they're good or if they're poor, and then the items they'd have accordingly. And then right here I have a list of different alcohols and illegal substances within the game, because sometimes the players want to go to an aristocratic party, and something like this adds some really wacky, fun effects that the players always seem to find really entertaining. Next up we have magic items. Now, a lot of magic items I will prepare in advance. I won't prepare on the day, or just through improvisation. But if the players want to buy a magical item or sell one, I use the DM's Guild sane magical item prices in order to sort of get a reasonable price for things, because the prices in the Dungeon Master's Guide and Player Handbook are just ludicrous. We then have a bunch of different types of arrows and sort of like some interesting additional magical items that I think are pretty useful. So I've put those in there just for safekeeping. And also some magical items that I plan on giving out soon. This is one from, I believe, Critical Role, Fenthras, Wrath of the Fey Warden. Really interesting magical items found within the Tal'Dorei campaign guide. If you guys have not picked that up yet, I highly recommend giving it a look. Then we go on to probably the most important tab, and that is Dungeons and Wilderness. This is like super important right here. But basically, Dungeons and Wilderness, it's all to do with encounters out in the wild. So again, we use the Game Mastery's Guide for just those random tables to places to find a dungeon, the types of dungeon, as well as dungeon entrances and dungeon rooms. We've got some really interesting ones, for example, crypts, dining halls, galleries. They just allow you to give a bit more detail and description. Then you can find this on the DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG. And it's basically, it's the, I believe it's called like the A to Z. Dungeons A to Z, something along those lines. The Dungeon Alphabet, that's what it's called. So this is basically literally an A to Z of things you might find in dungeons. So altars. And I've basically gone through this entire book and found the ones that I think I will use the most. For example, caves, doors, magical devices, puzzles, potions. What I've also done is I've also added, using Donjon, which is a brilliant website, I've added a bunch of custom traps at different levels. So I know that the first 5 on this list are for levels 5, then it goes to level 10, then it goes to level 15 and level 20 at later levels. And I sort of did this because this was a really brilliant and simple way of giving me a good variety of difficult and really interesting trap ideas. So I quite like that. So this right here allows me to give a bit more details to a dungeon and to expand it and improve it. If I have to come up with one on the fly, I can use one of these booklets to do so. Then we use the Wilderness Toolbox from the Game Mastery Guide, which is pretty much exactly the same as the dungeon one, but specifically for outdoor encounters. And then using those D100 lists I mentioned earlier, we talk about the travel complications, and these are really interesting. These are people you might find on the road. For example, a blizzard swirls up, impairing vision and forcing players to make constitution saves against cold damage. They're just completely random, but also add a little bit of interesting dynamics. Then you get attacked by goblins. And then last up, we have diseases and crafting. This is a very minor chapter. I don't really use this very often, but when you need it, it comes in handy. This is to do with crafting recipes. I believe that you can find this as a free document if you just Google D&D crafting recipes. It's something just to sort of work as a baseline that you can expand and improve upon. And again, I use these as these D100 lists. I wish I could remember the actual website address, but you should be able to find it by Googling. It's just a D100 list of different diseases within the game that you can easily add. And what I really like is curses as well. So you can add like a load of different effects like these by just throwing them in, and some really interesting stuff in here. So that's it, guys. This is what I bring to my games. This allows me to run games really quickly and easily. Having a load of different lists and D100 lists and things like that will basically allow you to come up with things on the fly that don't feel out of place. So I hope you guys have found some really good resources from this, and hope you implement them into your own games. Have a great day.